His first full book, Bedlam's Best and Finest, is an experimental poetic expose of mental illness and health, published by Eyewear Press. His pamphlet, After All Tomorrow's Parties, is published by Knives, Forks and Spoons. And Michael has toured the UK and Ireland extensively and toured Central and East Canada. He has headlined many events, art centres and festivals. He also hosts a wonderful Lit Up Poetry event monthly, which encourages open micers and headliners to read a mixture of original work and poems and by poets they admire and are inspired from. Having won the Ulster Poetry Slam in October, he recently represented Ireland in the Euro Poetry Slam in Brussels, coming fourth and qualifying for the World Poetry Slam in September this year. Bisexual, bipolar, bilingual, by accident, buy his book tonight, it says. So would you please welcome Michael Wilson.
Michael Wilson.
Hey, great to see you all. Thank you very much, Finn. Cheers. That's always a problem when you put too much in an intro. Gets everybody's hopes up. Yeah, this is my first piece. It's called A Piano to a Small Town. I came back 9 stretched short years ago, and a mighty mess. You didn't leave me standing in the doorway long, the wind rain of a dirty weather day. Instead, you opened the whole place up under 1,000 different skies. I used to ask, which reflected the other first, the sea or the sky? I used to ask, does snow sometimes fall into the ocean? All lived in a different life, stopgap existences of habit and ritual. I know better now. Scaled, slowly shed the scales from my eyes, lifted my head above the wash of your low-cast clouds, drinking daylight with the regular shoals of locals, drinking down the sleepy evenings until I'd untangle myself from weeds and powders and potions that made every day the same and little point having it all. The cafes where I wrote out in longhand the archaic esoteric codes of the heart, the students in their summertime existences, their bright colors, the summer crush of tourists and the sprung floor of houses of people I'm blessed to know. The cafe, the street, decked out in cafes that drink in the beautiful bay waters. It is here where I shed dangerous habits, knocked them down one by one until all that remained was a heart turned back red by the love of you and only you. Thank you. Cheers. Yes, I'm just going to do one big piece actually tonight. This is the first time this show has ever been, any of it has ever been performed. As I said, it was coming out queer. This is my new show. It's called LGBTQI plus NI. It was thankfully funded by the Arts Council. I also worked with the absolute fantastic mentor, Jerry Potter, on this, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. He was absolutely fantastic. So this is the first section of it. It's a full hour in usual time. LGBTQI plus NI. Growing up wrong. What most sets us apart is often what brings us together. My whole body was shaking. I could barely stand. Back behind the door, back to the wall, he kissed me, knowing fine well that we would be back any second. My blood was pounding in my head. It had been weeks. We'd only started having sex, but no one knew. When I used to walk into the writing group in the fusty parish hall, he would smile at me from his seat. A secret smile. The first day I read a poem at the group, he told me later I was so nervous he wanted to hug me there and then. At the pub, ritual pint or two on a Tuesday evening, Michelle was playing the big I am as per around a table covered in glasses. Scott was boasting about yet another award while under the table. Stephen stroked my legs with him when no one was looking. Every so often we'd catch each other's eye. This is what it's all about, I thought. But even my therapist didn't know I was queer. I kept calling Stephen Alice in the weekly meetups in the Starbucks near Central Library, Manchester. Surely in Manchester, no one should feel that they belong in a closet. No one should ever feel alone in Manchester. At that party, Stephen knew I wanted to come clean. At that party, we had talked about it. He told me he thought coming out was terrifying, but in the end, the only regret you harbor is not having done it a long time ago. John had weaseled it out of me. Over a phone call from London to Portrush, I was laid on a friend's bed, drunk, nicely drunk, the kind of drunk that doesn't lead to too much carnage. We said carnage a lot back then. That and mint and easy tiger. It's funny how words come and go. 1 minute you're current and overused, the next you're never touched again. That was what I feared most about coming out. The rejection. It's what queers expect in Northern Ireland, or at least I thought they did. My friend who had known me for years managed to get me to admit that I was queer, that I was bi. He said, "We all knew you were hotel motel." And with that, it was out, but only to a tight ring of friends. My partner used to wear a t-shirt self-made with the legend, "Ulster says no to sodomy." He was from the northwest of England, so he thought it was kind of funny, and I guess it is, but this is the kind of shit we often had to put up with back here. But I suppose reapproaching the negative sentiment somehow leads it to owning your pain, controlling your persecution. The slogan was uttered. The man shouted more than uttered by the Reverend Ian Paisley, the poster boy for conservative fundamentalist Christianity. My grandmother voted for him religiously. She used to tell us, me and my two brothers, that she would always love us with only two caveats. One, we didn't take drugs. Two, we didn't grow up to be bum boys. A shitty business. Literally, she once told me in her kitchen when she cooked one of her legendary fried breakfasts. She made the best Ulster fry, and she loved us very much. Ironically, when I was with Stephen and started performing poetry, I wrote a poem about him, but called it Sarah. Because even in the poetry scene, even in the liberal arts, I was still too afraid to come out. My grandmother loved the poem. "Read me Sarah," she would ask me over the phone, as I sat there with a joint in my hand, and I must have read her the poem 20 or 30 times. It was the closest I ever came to telling her how much I loved Stephen, that her love was beautiful, worthy of poetry, worthy of acceptance. But at once, when it all started, it was horrible. It haunted the corridors of Korean academical institution. Back then, being called gay was the absolute worst put down. A shameful, vengeful moniker. And I suppose all of us were in a soup of puberty urges. There's a point in your teen when everyone is gay because there's so much carnage. Mine, I couldn't shake, but I knew it was a phase, something to go through and come out the other side, fine, adjusted, healthy, right. It was an all-boys school back then. They were a scourge. It left me at first year uni wondering how to talk to girls. It also created a cauldron of fear and spite amongst boys who felt even more shameful and wrong being queer, or at least visiting that side of the spectrum, even if only now and again. My camouflage was that everyone was called gay, one way or another, on a semi-regular basis. So I hid amongst the herd, hoping against hope I didn't get spotted with the odd hard-on that puberty springs on you on a semi-regular basis. But the collective dread we all had of having one in the changing rooms out, that could be the stuff of legend. Strangely, despite being bullied mercilessly for the first 3 years of secondary school, the insult gay didn't feature for me much more than it did for the rest of us. It was different, and that was different enough. Years fly over, and I'm stood in a gay bar in Canal Street, Manchester, the New Union, one of the oldest bars in the city, boasting to folk at the sticky bar that I'm bisexual. I find more rejection from them than most of the straight community. Bi people are a scourge, hated by the queers for being confused, hated by the straights for being greedy, disease-spreading degenerates. Bigotry can come from anywhere and everywhere, and often it does. Some people do have a romantic way of looking at it, though. Helen, short-lived slam, bright and then gone out, said to me as I lay on her bed some late afternoon, her voice all dreamy and soft, "You're the perfect mix of masculine and feminine." Then she got to know me. In Northern Ireland, for years, you couldn't give blood if you were self-identifying as bi. These days, things have changed. You can now, if you haven't had sex in a year. As I said, we're dirty, greedy, disease-spring degenerates who should just be straight. My own dad had said when Freddie Mercury died, he had a choice. He didn't have to have sex with men, as if it was all his fault, as if it could have been avoided. Now you see why I was so shy about coming out. Even years and years later, people are still not quite there yet. One of the parishioners, Adam, told me he didn't think queers should marry while we were on a bus ride. I felt like telling him, but I'm queer, just to see him backpedal. But since coming home, I find it harder and harder to come out. My last 2 relationships have been with women, so being bi, yeah, I guess I have a choice. I just haven't met a man back here that I would consider worth the risk. I must get to know someone well before opening up. A queer Mancunian poet once told me and all those at the pub table, you don't come out once, you have to keep coming out. Over and over to different people each time. It can be exhausting. Portstewart is an idyll, is an ocean edge, wonderful small town punching well above its weight. With a local student population, tourists, bikers, Christians, and cruisers, some of its vectors overlap. I moved back about 10 years ago, head full of oily, depressed thoughts, fleeing a drug dip, rat-infested flat in Manchester. The locals took me in. But there's a kind of casual homophobia in many of the conversations. You can easily find yourself seizing up, denying yourself. There's a local popular Christian church, one of those modern ones that seems oddly antiquated, that states that gays, etc., are fickle, promiscuous, terrible people. Anything else, any other viewpoint is a view of the devil. The devil only lives if it exists in the fears of otherwise good people, but not all church people are that way. And into that cool light, illuminated, comes my father. I have a weird knack of confessing to stuff when I'm depressed and anxious. I told a lover I had cheated on them. I told of embarrassing truths that had been securely locked away. I came out to my dad over the phone. My brother was furious. My dad, always a calm head in a crisis, just said, it doesn't matter. But God loves us all. The ministry had taught him how to love, not hate. I sincerely believe it is my father's cast iron faith that led him to love me, no matter what. Just don't tell your mother, he said. Alan, my brother, had been the same when I come out to him. Just don't tell Dad. My younger brother, the first one I came out to, said, just don't tell Alan. Ironically enough, when I finally got round to telling my mother, she didn't even break her verbal stride. My own dad said to me over that phone call, I kind of had my suspicions. How come often the one coming out is often the last one to know? Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers. Thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Oh,
Thank you very much. Cheers. Just a quick plug while I've got the opportunity. Lit Up is every third Thursday. I think it's the 21st this month. Look it up. I'll put the link on Facebook. I've got some of the Lit Uppers here tonight. Leslie, we got Gerald, we got Jeff Cottrell, we got Natalie. We got Gary's done. Clive is headline. Come along if you can. It'll be lovely to see you. Thank you all very, very much. Cheers, guys. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
We love you, Michael.
okay. Thank you, Mike. That was wonderful. That last line, always the last to know. Wow. Brilliant stuff, sir. Thank you. Thank you for coming along here. That was, wow.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. You give me an idea, actually. Something funny